Let's talk about a book that really shook things up. Back in 2006, the biologist Richard Dawkins published The God Delusion. And wow, did it make waves. It became this intellectual lightning rod, sparking huge debates all over the world. So in this explainer, we're going to boil it all down. We're going to get right to the core arguments Dawkins makes against religious belief. You might expect a book with a title like that to come out swinging, but Dawkins actually starts with a mission statement. He calls it consciousness raising. See, his goal isn't necessarily to deconvert believers, but to reach people who are already on the fence, people who might not even realize that leaving their faith is a real, valid option. For them, he says, atheism can be a totally happy, moral, and intellectually satisfying way to live. So if the goal is just to say, hey, atheism is an option, why such a provocative title? Why make such a forceful case? Well, it's because Dawkins believes that our society has this massive blind spot when it comes to religion, and he thinks it needs to be called out, directly and unapologetically. But before he gets to what he sees as the problem, his first step is to build something up. He wants to firmly establish that you can be an atheist and be a good person, happy, balanced, moral, and smart. This is the bedrock of his whole argument, that you just don't need God to live a good and meaningful life. And that brings us right to the heart of the problem he wants to tackle, this special, unearned respect that he argues religion gets. His point is that religious belief is given this unique free pass from the kind of criticism and questioning we apply to literally every other part of our lives. So here's the crucial point. It's a double standard. Think about it. We demand evidence and solid reasoning for our politics, for science, for economics, but when it comes to religion, faith, which is by definition belief without evidence, is often held up as a virtue. And Dawkins argues this isn't harmless. It has real consequences, like when hateful ideas get shielded from criticism just because they're labeled religious beliefs. And these consequences are very, very real. He uses this Gallup poll from 1999 to show that this prejudice isn't just theoretical. Back then, only 49% of Americans said they'd vote for a qualified atheist candidate. Just let that sink in. That's a staggering number, lower than for almost any other group. For Dawkins, this is Exhibit A for the social price that comes from what he calls religion's undeserved respect. Okay, so if religion is a delusion, as the title boldly claims, why is it everywhere? Why is it so common? Now, Dawkins doesn't say it's because people are stupid or bad. Instead, he looks for an explanation in evolutionary psychology. The argument here is that religious belief itself wasn't what evolution was aiming for. It's more of an accidental byproduct, a sort of misfiring of other mental software that was actually super useful for our ancestors' survival. It's like a moth. A moth's brain is wired to navigate by a distant light source, like the moon. That works great. But when it sees a nearby candle, that same programming sends it spiraling right into the flame. The instinct was good, but the context made it go haywire. And one of the key mental tools he talks about is the Hyperactive Agent Detection Device, or HADD. It sounds a bit technical, but the idea is simple. Imagine you're an early human, and you hear a rustle in the bushes. If you assume it's a predator and run, you survive, even if it was just the wind. But if you assume it's the wind, and it's actually a lion, well, you don't pass on your genes. So we evolve to see agency and intention everywhere. And that, Dawkins argues, makes our brains fertile ground for ideas about invisible agents, like gods and spirits, controlling the world. All right, but what about being good? This is a huge one, right? The argument that without God, there's no foundation for morality. Dawkins takes this on directly, and he offers a completely different source for our sense of right and wrong. He argues that trying to base our morality on ancient scriptures isn't just unnecessary, it can be downright monstrous. He points to stories like the one about Jephthah, who promises God a sacrifice for a military victory and ends up having to sacrifice his own daughter as a burnt offering, and God doesn't step in to stop him. For Dawkins, stories like this prove that our modern moral compass is wildly different from, and he'd say much better than, what we find in these ancient texts. So if our morality doesn't come from scripture, where does it come from? Dawkins' answer is what he calls the moral zeitgeist. It's a German word that basically means the spirit of the times. The idea is that our collective sense of what's right and wrong evolves. Our views on things like slavery, women's rights, and equality have changed drastically. And he argues this moral progress isn't handed down from religion. It's built up over time by secular thinking, things like reason, empathy, and public debate. This brings us to the book's final and, honestly, maybe its most passionate argument. It's all about children and the idea of indoctrination, and it's a theme he hits on over and over. He makes this really powerful distinction. Think about it. We wouldn't call a 4-year-old a Marxist child or a libertarian child, right? Because we all kind of know they're too young to grasp complex political ideas. And yet, we have no problem saying Catholic child or Muslim child. Dawkins argues this is a form of mental abuse. We should use language that respects the child's right to choose later in life. And this quote just nails the heart of his argument. It's all about intellectual freedom. For Dawkins, religion has to be a personal choice that an adult makes, not an identity that's stamped on you at birth. The whole point is to give kids the tools to think for themselves so they can make up their own minds based on evidence and reason. And so, that's the fundamental question the book really leaves us with. When you boil it all down, Dawkins' entire argument centers on this one core conflict. Are we going to teach our children what to think, or are we going to teach them how to think? It's a powerful challenge that, even all these years later, is still at the center of so much debate.